Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this program today, we shall be marking the incredible achievement of Israel marking her 76th anniversary as an independent nation state, and we'll also be discussing the academic media war against Israel. Warm welcome to the programme, and today's special guest is all the way from Essex. He's been on the programme a few times. He is Jonathan Hoffman, who's an Israeli blogger and also an Israeli campaigner as well. Jonathan, it's an absolute pleasure to see you on the Middle East Report today.
Thank you, Simon. It's good to be back.
Jonathan, you have been involved in the last couple of decades really standing for Israel, and you do quite an amazing articles and stories that you share on your blog, plus also you're very much involved in Israel advocacy. Why was it so important for you to get involved in Israel advocacy and to advocate for the truth of Israel's righteous cause?
Well, I came from a strongly supporting family, strongly supporting Israel. And after school, I spent 8 months on a kibbutz. I loved it. If I hadn't had a place at Oxford, I would have probably stayed there. And it really came from there. But when I started to see the misinformation, the defamation, the lies, I thought I had to do something about it. This was back in the early 70s, and it's now gone on for over 50 years, and you know, so that's where we are.
And Jonathan, do you want to share with us how the horrors of October the 7th has impacted you? Because, you know, ever since I've been recording the Middle East Report, you know, it's almost like this is a complete game changer, that everyone has a different perspective, a different viewpoint. When did you first learn about the horrors of what's happening on October the 7th, and when did you become aware of the sheer magnitude of what happened on that day against those southern Israeli communities?
My wife is descended from a eminent Sephardi family, and she loves to go to Bevis Mark Synagogue in the city. And it was Simchat Torah when we finish reading from the Bible and we start the cycle again. And we were on our way to Bevis Marks, and I had my mobile on, and I saw what was happening. And you know, the rabbi referred to it in the synagogue, and we watched the news for the rest of the day, and that's when it started. And it 7 months later, it seems like, you know, we're still October the 355th or whatever it is. It really, we're glued to the news, glued to everything, and it really hasn't stopped. When you ask people in Israel how they are, they used to say Mutziyan or Beseda, we're okay, excellent, and now they say Sabir, which just means so, we're okay. Everybody, not just in Israel but also in the diaspora, is very conscious of what happened, the hostages, it was, to say it was a game changer is an underestimate. It was, in my lifetime, and I'm 71, it was the biggest single event to shake Israel, bigger than the Yom Kippur War in 1973, bigger than the Six-Day War in 1967. This was absolutely massive. The fact that the security failed, and the fact that there were 130 hostages taken, the devastation, it was, people have not yet come to terms with it, I think. And who knows how the future will come to terms with it.
And Jonathan, how are you and yourself? Because it's so vital that, you know, Christians watching this program who have Jewish friends or have Jewish work colleagues, that they show that expression of support and comfort at this time. Because, because we know that October the 7th not only affected Israelis, but it's affected world Jewry with this unprecedented rise of Jew hatred.
You know, we're all watching the media all the time. People have family in Israel. People have family serving in the IDF in Israel. People have lost relatives in the tragedy. Some people, their relatives are hostages in Gaza. So I think people, certainly the people I've spoken to, really appreciate massively their work colleagues or their friends, bearing them in their minds and in their prayers. It's so important.
And how is your community? How is the Jewish community in London? I know that you've moved away from North London. You're living in kind of Essex now, but share with us how the Jewish community is responding to the horrors of October the 7th. But it's not only that, is it? It's this blatant Jew hatred that we're seeing everywhere now, from our local election councils electing councillors on a pro-Palestinian platform that every time they open their mouth, you can just hear the hatred come out of their hearts against Israel and against the Jewish people. And we also see that we are in a period where there's unprecedented recorded incidences of Jew hatred as well everywhere, where it's on our media, in our society, and we see that on the streets of London and throughout our major cities at these big pro-Palestinian demonstrations that are taking place, sadly, every Saturday.
Well, there's a mixture of feelings in the Jewish community. There are those who are scared. They're scared to wear their Magen David, they're scared to wear their skull cap in public, in the streets. Some are even scared to go out, to go shopping. School children are scared of, if they're on the bus, of what might happen. But I think it's also has brought out a lot of, especially among the Israeli community in London, a lot of people who you would never see demonstrating on the streets, but they're now out there. It's called the 710 chain, and there are demonstrations all the time. I think there was one at the Qatari embassy a couple of days ago. So it really has energized people into activism. Whether that activism, what that activism would achieve, I don't know, but I think there's a feeling we must do something. We must do something to support the hostages, whether it's posting their pictures on the wall. And when I was in Finchley Road in North London today, I saw there was a wall full of hostages' pictures. Whether it's that, or whether it's writing letters to hostages' families, or whether it's demonstrating in the streets, there's a feeling, you know, we must. This is our responsibility. These are our people. We must do something.
Absolutely. And what are your thoughts about the times in which we're living in? Because I don't say this lightly, but it almost feels as if we're seeing history repeat itself with the level of Jew hatred that we're seeing around the world today, the rise of evil against Israel and against our democracies. It almost feels as if we've gone back in history and we're reliving the 1930s again. Obviously different scenario, different circumstances, but still that same level of hatred that is being expressed against the Jewish people.
There are a lot of similarities, but the main difference was the 1930s was state-led.
Yeah, exactly. And this is
not state-led. There was a survey recently from Henry Jackson Society about attitudes of Muslims in the UK. And I mean, it was pretty horrific. 72% of the Muslims surveyed said they think Israel is a racist state. And other results were equally horrific. And what's going on in the universities is diabolical. I mean, there are, and I've said this for a long time, there are some universities in the UK which are effectively no-go for most Jewish students. SOAS in London is one. Warwick in the Midlands is another. Manchester, who used to be, when I was growing up, was a very popular university with Jewish
My
students.
university.
Yeah, Manchester has become horrific,
Yep.
and Jewish students are having to walk through, really nasty, vicious anti-Israel demonstrations on campus every day, and this is a major, and we've seen the encampments at Columbia University in America and other American universities, and it's happening here, Oxford and Cambridge and other universities. Bristol's got one, I think, now. So it is a very, very, very toxic atmosphere, and a very tough atmosphere, and it's really hard to be out there defending Israel. And I had a flag on our window, on our balcony, for quite a long time, and I ended up with red paint being daubed over it, and we had to take it down. So it's a horrible atmosphere, like I've never known before. But I don't think it's comparable to the 1930s because it's not state-sponsored. We might say yet, and I mean, if we get a Labour government in the next election, things might change, although I'm not comparing that to the 1930s, but things certainly might change for the worst. But it's not state-sponsored this time.
Yeah, and I mean we'll talk about the universities a bit later on in the program, Jonathan. But next week is what is known as a Yom Ha'atzmaut, which is Israel's Independence Day, which falls on Monday the 13th of May, and then goes through into the next day, which is the 14th of May. So this is the first time in 19 years where Yom Ha'atzmaut actually falls on the 14th of May, which is the actual anniversary of the re-establishment of the modern state of Israel. Considering what Israel has been through in the last year has been absolutely horrific. The biggest massacre against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, where over 1,200 were murdered, 6,000 were injured, many of those critically, over 250 taken hostage in Gaza. Israel currently at war fighting against Hamas in Gaza, unprecedented international pressure on Israel to have a ceasefire and not to destroy the remaining battalions of Hamas. And then, of course, the horrors and the stories coming out of October the 7th. How do you think your beloved nation, the nation of Israel, will be marking this year's anniversary, despite the incredible achievements of the State of Israel over the past 76 years?
I think it's going to be a very different Yom Ha'atzmaut. Let's remember, Yom Ha'atzmaut is preceded the previous day by Yom HaZikaron, which is the day when Israel remembers the soldiers who've fallen since way back before 1948, since the 19th century, the people who've fallen in the cause of Zionism. And it's something like 27,000 now, added to the ones who've fallen since October the 7th. And Yom HaZikaron is a very powerful day. I mean, it's a day when children will go to visit the graves of their fathers, for example. It's a day when widows will go to visit the graves of their late husbands. We can't imagine how significant and powerful it is. And then, amazingly, as sunset comes, the atmosphere changes, or has in previous Yom Ha'atzmaut changed into one of rejoicing that we have a state, rejoicing in the history. But I think this year, even Yom Ha'atzmaut will obviously be tinged with sadness, with remembering the hostages. So it's going to be a very different Yom Ha'atzmaut. I think one has to kind of view things with different lenses, with a short lens on the troubles since October the 7th, but with a long lens on the amazing achievements of Weizmann, who built the momentum towards the Balfour Declaration and the establishment of the state in 1948, and everything that the state's been through, and the academic achievements, the fact that Israel is now a member of the OECD, the Club of Industrial Nations, the strength of the IDF. So with that lens, I think we can celebrate. But there's also the short lens where people are still trying to come to terms with the horrors of October the 7th. So it's going to be a very different Yom Ha'atzmaut, I think.
That's absolutely, but it's still an incredible achievement what Israel's achieved over the past 76 years. So let's have a look at this excellent news report reflecting on last year's anniversary, where Israel reached that milestone of her 75th anniversary. And of course, so much has happened in the past year. But let's look back at some of the incredible achievements when David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, declared independence on the 14th of May, 1948.
הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל היא מדינת ישראל.
Here in Independence Hall on May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the birth of the modern state of Israel. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, the Jewish people had a nation.
He chose the words, "We hereby declare the establishment," it says here, "of a Jewish state in the land of Israel to be known as the state of Israel." This was the birth of a Jewish state. As for all Jews, Ben-Gurion was standing here as the voice of 11 million Jews around the world who had no voice, who had no address, and nowhere to go to.
Isaac Dror's mission here is to ensure the story of Israel's beginning remains alive and continues to spread.
It was promised to us by God. We are the only people in the history of the world that live on the same land, speak in the same language, and believe in the same God more than 3,000 years.
From a biblical perspective, many see Israel fulfilling the prophecy in the book of Ezekiel, where the dry bones of the Jewish people come to life after 2,000 years of exile. Organizations like the Jewish Agency help lay the groundwork for that 2,000 years in the making Jewish state.
The Jewish Agency was the lead organization in establishing and giving birth to the modern state of Israel. The whole purpose of establishing the Jewish Agency was to, on the one hand, unite the global Jewish people and to bring the global Jewish people in front of the British mandate to be the organization that would lead and establish a national home for the Jewish people in the land of Israel.
To fully comprehend the miracle of the country's birth, consider that it happened in the shadow of the Holocaust, or Shoah in Hebrew, when the world learned how Nazi Germany murdered 6 million Jews.
When you understand that only 3 years after the end of the Shoah, the lowest point the Jewish people reached in its exile, we started our redemption process and we regained our independence after 2,000 years of terrible events. Well, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what a miracle is.
Even so, Dayan dispels one myth about the connection between Israel's beginning and the Holocaust.
Israel was not established because of the Holocaust. Israel was established in spite of the Holocaust. Israel would have been a much robust, greater, secure, successful country if there were additional 6 million Jews and their descendants in the world. But Israel is the guarantee that there will be no other Shoah for the Jewish people.
Now, after 75 years, Israel maintains its safety and security with one of the most powerful militaries in the world.
Then it was small units of very patriotic people, some of them Holocaust survivors who just came off the boat from Europe, put on IDF uniforms and joined battle and defended Israel in 1948 against 6 Arab armies. Today, we are a highly organized, developed, and well-funded military, perhaps the strongest in the region, that enjoys a significant technological advantage over all of our enemies.
Israel is also an economic miracle. This tiny country with less than 10 million people has the highest concentration of new businesses per capita in the world, earning it the nickname of Startup Nation. John Medved, founder of Our Crowd, a venture capital investment company, showcases these accomplishments at his annual Investor Summit.
This is what Israel is supposed to be doing, right? If Israel wasn't the startup nation, so what are we going to be? Okay, I'm sorry, this is our destiny. Our destiny is to create. Our destiny is to, fix the world. And we're just a little people. We make a lot of noise. But I think that most Israelis, whether they wear a yarmulke or they don't wear a yarmulke, view this as a spiritual undertaking, that we're doing this not just to make money, but to do good.
Yet throughout its history, Israel has faced nearly insurmountable odds. Just hours after Ben-Gurion declared the state, 6 Arab nations tried to drive it into the sea. While it survived, Israel would be challenged again in the 1967 Six-Day War and the 1973 Yom Kippur War. After thousands of years in exile and 75 years as a country, Israel stands despite enemies within, along each border, and beyond.
It's a modern miracle. The rebirth of the Jewish state against all odds, a people that were left for dead, that had been dispersed to the four corners of the earth, and you saw the ancient prophecies fulfilled, where you had the ingathering of the Jewish exiles, the restoration of Jewish sovereignty in modern times, against all odds.
Former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. and now Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer tells CBN News this miracle can be seen unfolding throughout the nation.
And you're seeing that happen wherever you go in Israel, whether it's in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and you saw all the ancient history, and then you see the startup nation. You go north, south, east, and west. Israel is a modern miracle. It is the greatest miracle of the 20th century and maybe the greatest miracle of the last 2,000 years.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And happy birthday, Israel. What an incredible achievement of reaching 76 years in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And just explain to us, for our Christian audience, will you, Jonathan, the fact that the Jewish people have been in exile for over 2,000 years, particularly up until really the 1880s, when we saw the first wave of Aliyah, Jewish immigration to the land of Israel, and how Israel is still the focal point of Judaism, is still Jerusalem is the focal point for the Jewish people. Just share with us the connection between the land of Israel and the Jewish people in the diaspora.
Well, I think it's a connection which is often not appreciated. Religious Jews will pray 5 times a day for Israel. We pray every Sabbath, every Saturday, every Shabbat. We pray for Israel. A lot of us have family in Israel, and obviously Israel, the chosen people, Israel is mentioned in the Bible. You just have to see the story of the Exodus, Moses leading people to the Promised Land. It's at the heart of Judaism. But I mean, one of the problems we face is that the secular authorities in this country fail to recognize the inextricable link between Judaism and Israel. And they say, well, because there are non-Jews who support Israel and because there are Jews who do not support Israel, Israel is just this political entity and has nothing to do with Judaism. And I've seen it time and time again in the courts, in the universities. You know, they have this chant, Judaism yes, Israel no, where they divorce the two, and you cannot divorce Judaism from Israel. They're two sides of the same coin. And particularly at the moment, with anti-Semitism rife, what would we do without a Jewish state? What would French Jews who are emigrating en masse to Israel, what would they do if we didn't have a Jewish state? What would we in the UK do if we, you know, heaven forbid we get a hostile government and there wasn't an Israel? So the centrality of Israel is something which is not, to Judaism, is not appreciated by the secular authorities in this country, certainly. And something I've been trying to work towards is to get them to recognize the courts, the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, to recognize that, and the judges to recognize the inextricable link between Israel and Judaism, but they don't recognize it even now.
Oh, it's extraordinary when you consider all the archaeological discoveries that actually proves the Bible, it proves the biblical account of the Jewish story, and it proves the connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. And that's extraordinary because you can't divorce the two. They're one and the same. But what's it like knowing, for example, that this has been the dream and the aspiration of your ancestors? It doesn't matter if you're an Ashkenazi Jew or if you're a Sephardi Jew, that longing to go home to Zion, that longing to go home to Jerusalem, of having your own independent state, became a reality on the 14th of May 1948 and has been a reality ever since. And all it takes is to get on a plane from London or from Manchester and fly to Tel Aviv, and there you are, you're in the promised land again. Just share with us how remarkable this is to have the modern state of Israel in existence.
I'm sort of 4 years younger than the Israeli state. I'm 71, the Israeli state is 76. So I can't say it's the greatest achievement of my lifetime, because I wasn't alive in 1948, but I think it's the greatest achievement of the 20th century to have fought the political battle to win a Jewish state that arose from the ashes of the Second World War. The survivors of the Holocaust, many of them wanted to go to Israel and have gone to Israel. There are more Holocaust survivors in Israel than anywhere else in the world. It is an absolute miracle. And you know, despite the issues that Israel faces at the moment, let's remember that the essence of that miracle as we go into Yom Ha'atzmaut.
Absolutely. And also, Jonathan, if we take, for example, one aspect of one of Israel's greatest achievements, and that's Aliyah, the fact that Israel has been able to incorporate Jewish communities from all over the world and to then actually make a functioning state where they play an equal part in Israel's success story is extraordinary, isn't it? And the lengths that the Jewish Agency go to, together with the state of Israel, to bring the Jewish people home. I mean, I'll give you an example, the incredible story of the Jews from Ethiopia, which was Menachem Begin's heart and desire to bring the Ethiopian Jews back to Israel, who are facing incredible persecution in Ethiopia and other places like that. I
mean, I was at university during the days of when Soviet Jews in Russia wanted to leave Russia, and they were forbidden to leave Russia. You know, the incredible welcome that they got when they were allowed to leave Russia. I mean, Israel's been the most amazing melting pot for Jews from all over the world. But the thing which binds them together is the Hebrew language. And the revival of the Hebrew language from a language like Latin or Greek, which was an ancient language, to a modern language is absolutely amazing. The story of Ben Yehuda wouldn't allow his children to speak anything other than Hebrew. And of course, they didn't have anybody else they speak Hebrew to, so they must have been rather isolated. But the story of the revival of the Hebrew language is an incredible story by itself. And that they realized that you couldn't incorporate all these different cultures without having a common language. And the revival, I mean, apart from the establishment of the state, the revival of the Hebrew language is a miracle of itself.
Absolutely, and you're currently learning modern Hebrew now, aren't you? So, yeah, which is an incredible language. It's a difficult language to learn, but it's an incredible language. And I think you can't understand Israel unless you understand Hebrew, because it's so direct.
No, I agree.
And it gives you that real insight into the culture
Absolutely.
and the mentality of the Israelis as well. But also, I mean, we can talk about Israel's startup nation, which is an incredible success, Israel's innovation in terms of technology, medical technology. But I suppose the one thing when it comes to Israel is this desire to make the world a better place, this desire to be first on the scene if there's a natural disaster, whether there's an earthquake somewhere, the desire to help Africa with its irrigation problem, to help other nations that are struggling with farming, using all the lessons that Israel's learned about cultivating crops in the desert, and then sharing that know-how with other nations. And knowing that Israel, which is the only democracy in the Middle East with democratic institutions, where there is freedom of speech, there is a powerful judiciary, there is multi-party elections, and for example, even Israeli Arabs are able to become members of the Supreme Court or be one of the judges there and play active part in Israeli society as well. I mean, this was like the dream of the early Jewish Zionist pioneers, and now we see it in its fullness. But what do you think it is that makes the nation of Israel such a unique nation amongst all the nations in the world?
I think the knowledge of the history, the knowledge that what can go wrong if society goes wrong, and if you look at you look at Nobel Prizes, look at the numbers of Nobel Prizes that have been won by Jewish people. I mean, I'm an economist. If you look at the Nobel Prize for economics, about 60 or 70% of Nobel Prizes for economics have been won by Jews. I can't explain it, but that's just the way it is. And you take that ability and you put it in a Jewish state, well, you're going to have something incredible, and I think that's what Israel is. It's called the startup nation. I don't know if you have Waze in your car, but if you have Waze in your car, that's an Israeli invention. The people who say we should boycott Israeli goods, well, I always say, well, if you go into hospital, you've got to say, I don't want any Israeli medicines or any Israeli medical equipment. And the National Health Service cannot do without Israeli medicines or Israeli medical equipment. There was somebody, a really nasty guy who led the Al-Quds parade, the nasty parade every year in London against Israel. And he owns a pharmacy in Kensington. And I went into his pharmacy, and sure enough, Israeli medicines. So here he is on the one hand, preaching hate against Israel, but in his pharmacy, he's got Israeli medicines and Israeli medical equipment. I mean, give me a break. Where's the hypocrisy there?
Huge amount of hypocrisy. Moving on to kind of more depressing topic of conversation, Jonathan, really, and that's the plight of academia at the moment. How academics and how our universities in this country and also in the United States and the Western world are being used to target Israel. But we've also seen, for example, that now an increasing number of Jewish students no longer feel safe on campus. Now, how is this academic freedom of expression? How is this really showing and defining how wrong our society and our academic institutions are, where Jewish students no longer feel safe to be Jewish, and also the hatred being directed at those that support and stand with the nation of Israel? Share your thoughts, please.
I think one has to start by distinguishing different disciplines in academia. Humanities, on the one hand, have been poisoned by anti-Israel sentiment. But on the other hand, medicine and science are okay. If you take humanities, the social sciences, it is not possible to be an academic at a British university who is openly supportive of Israel. And there's one academic I know who is on the left and who is Jewish and who fights anti-Semitism. He's been denied promotion overtly because of his of what he does. And the problem is it's self-perpetuating, because these people apply for grants, and the people who referee their academic grants are also infected by this anti-Israel poison. So, it's self-perpetuating. It's very hard to break it. And the problem is that the government won't intervene in universities because it's scared of being accused of violating academic freedom. Take the case of David Miller. David Miller was the professor at Bristol who was sacked because of anti-Semitism. There was a massive petition in support of David Miller from academics in Britain and elsewhere. And, I did a blog about those academics, and a lot of them were in positions of responsibility in the University Teachers Organisation, University Teachers Trade Union. So humanities is a disaster for Israel. And there have been cases where Jewish students have been marked down by their supervisors because they have been somewhat supportive of Israel. And in their exam papers, they've written some comments which have been supportive of Israel, and they've actually been marked down. And there have been cases where exam results have had to be revised because of this outright discrimination. There are universities in the UK which are no-go for most Jewish students. SOAS is one, LSE is becoming so, Queen Mary's in East London, Manchester, which used to be a mecca for Jewish students, is becoming really nasty. And in the 21st century, in a supposedly modern industrial country, to have universities which are no-go for people of a particular faith is an absolute outrage. But the government won't intervene.
I mean, talking about Manchester, I mean, this is a university that I attended for 3 years in the mid-90s, had the biggest JSOC in the country. Right, and I was very much involved in the JSOC because of the love for Israel and the identification with Jewish people in Israel. It was the first time I came into contact with Jewish people. I had Jewish friends. So for me, Jewish university societies like JSOC are so important. And then to think that, this was the biggest JSOC in the country, and now Jewish people are afraid to go there. It is absolutely frightening, but the writing was on the wall, even in the mid-90s, as we saw that they were being targeted by the Islamic Society because of the connection between the Jewish people and the nation of Israel. So, I mean, even back then, I kind of saw that their kind of trouble the writing was on the wall. But, I mean, surely, for example, that universities need to do more to protect academic freedom of expression. And, and when it comes to Israel, Israel is a light among the nations. And to not realise that, and to realise that Israel's not the problem, but Israel's actually the solution, and they fail to recognise that is frightening.
Yeah, we're a long way from that, Simon. I mean, and I should add that we in the Jewish community are not helping ourselves, because there are some Jewish societies which bar mention of Israel, and they say if you have an Israeli speaker, you have to have a separate Israel society to discuss Israel, and that's how far it's gone. It's appeasement, it's whatever you want to call it. So we're not helping ourselves, quite honestly. And the other problem is that we had a campaign that universities should accept the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism.
Absolutely.
Which says, for example, that to compare Jews or Israel with Nazis is anti-Semitic. To call Israel a racist state is anti-Semitic. Fine, they sign up. They sign up to the definition, but it's not about signing up. It's about recognizing and implementing it. And you have universities which sign up to the definition, but they will host really nasty anti-Israel speakers, and they will have an Israel Apartheid Week event. Israel Apartheid Week is itself a disgusting event. There's no apartheid in Israel. It's ridiculous. So university chancellors or vice chancellors have to wake up and smell the coffee. And if they don't, the government has to intervene. Although I don't think it will, but it ought to.
Yeah. Let's have a look now. This is particularly stateside, about how Jewish students in America, same pretty much in the UK and across Europe now, feel fear for their own personal safety whilst on university campuses.
On Columbia's campus, Jewish students endured threats with calls to go back to Poland. Here, a demonstrator points at pro-Israel students while holding a sign that reads, "Al-Qassam's next targets." And a Jewish professor is denied entry to the campus while school officials look on.
I am a professor here. I have every right to be everywhere on campus. You cannot let people that support Hamas on campus and me, a professor, not go on campus. Let me in now.
Meanwhile, other Columbia faculty members join protesters chanting "Free Palestine" and calling for the school to divest from companies selling weapons to Israel. Demonstrations growing more radical have Jewish students fearing for their safety, leading one rabbi to tell students to stay away because the school can't protect them.
I was there today, and it made me sick hearing the things they were saying and doing. So over this holiday, I kind of just want to try to avoid it as best as I can for my own safety.
Monday, the school went to online classes only as New York Governor Kathy Hochul came to see the situation firsthand.
Students are scared. They're afraid to walk on campus. They don't deserve that. I've never seen a level of protest that is so person to person. It is so visceral. And I'm not calling on everyone. People need to find their humanity. Have the conversations. Talk to each other.
Protests, however, spread to other schools in the Northeast. Monday night at NYU, police clashed with protesters while making arrests as they tore down a tent encampment. At Yale, police arrested 45 students for trespassing as their peers celebrated them as heroes. Pro-Palestinian students at MIT have declared part of their campus a liberated zone. While at Harvard, officials shut down Harvard Yard until Friday to prevent similar protests.
The reaction is simply horror.
Rabbi Moshe Hauer told CBN News it needs to be stopped.
It's been happening in one place after the other at different degrees, and if it's not addressed properly and efficiently, it will continue to grow. If they're doing things which break the law, they should have consequences as defined by the law. But they must have consequences. The answer can't be, we spoke to them.
Monday, President Biden condemned the anti-Semitic protests while also condemning those he says don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians. Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
I think what that shows is, more than anything else, that what a sorry state of affairs in which we're living in, where Jewish students on campus feel threatened, whether it's in the United States or whether it's in Britain or whether it's in Europe, which is totally unacceptable. And considering the incredible breakthroughs in science and research and innovation that Israel has actually produced, universities should be honouring Israel, not cursing them and preventing Jewish students and university professors from actually teaching at our universities. I mean, universities are supposed to be a time where university students are encouraged to develop their kind of academic freedom of expression. They're a time when they develop and begin to understand who they are, what they want to do in life, and gain a greater understanding in which the world they're living in, and also prepare them for the future. Now, if there's only one narrative that has been able to be taught at universities, and that is one where the enemies of Israel are praised, and yet Israel is demonized and vilified, and with it the Jewish people, then something is seriously wrong, not only at our universities, but also our societies as well. Because Israel represents what is good in the world, whilst Hamas and their Palestinian supporters represent what's evil in the world, because this isn't about Israel. This is about the Islamization of the West, using the Palestinian cause and Gaza as a pretext to do that. Your thoughts?
The problem is we're way outnumbered. We can, organisations like Stand With Us and other organisations in universities can campaign, but we're way outnumbered. And the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign is in schools. It shouldn't be, but it is. It's in the trade unions. We are way outnumbered, and there are students who are willing to see both sides. No, I wouldn't say both sides, but because for me there's only really one side. But the students who are willing to see the truth. I've been to debates, or I've been to events at SOAS, I've been to events in London, and I raise my voice and make myself heard. And at the end, occasionally, somebody will come up to me and they want to talk, and they realise that they've been fed complete lies and propaganda. And I recommend books to them. I recommend, like, Noah Tishby's book, I recommend to them. And you're able to change people's minds one-on-one, but there are millions of people out there who've been brainwashed. Not to, let's call it what it is, brainwashed. And how do we remove the brainwash of millions of people? Very difficult. One issue is these people at universities are going to want to get jobs sometime. And, if they've been named or convicted of violence at universities, they shouldn't be giving jobs in professions in the UK or the US. So you know, we have to start getting tough. These people are abusing our liberal society, and we have to start becoming less liberal. In France, they use water cannon, for example. I saw a video of a protest in Amsterdam where they simply had bulldozers come up, and they bulldozed away the tents and bulldozed away the protesters. We have to start becoming less liberal as a society, because these people are abusing our liberal society.
Absolutely. I just want to read a section of a great article written here by Jake Wallace Simon, who's the editor of the Jewish Chronicle. This time he's writing in the Daily Telegraph. He says, by comparison with their malevolent 20th century forebearers, today's youngsters are practically illiterate. But one could place side by side a photograph of Nazis linking hands to keep Jews out of Vienna University, where 2,700 Jewish students and academics were expelled in 1938, and a video of Moss Columbia students blocking entry to Zionists. One could ask if the fanaticism was not of a piece. What are your thoughts on what he said and the comparisons that he's making?
Well, I mean, I've got great respect for Jake, but again, the 1930s was state-sponsored, and we're not in that position now. It's not state-sponsored. But where he's right is the state is neglecting its responsibility. The universities have a duty of safeguarding. They should be safeguarding Jewish students against this horrible propaganda and these taunts against Jewish students. And the universities are failing because it's not really these people are academics. They're not used to being policemen, as it were, or supervisors. But we have to start getting less liberal with universities. If there is an anti-Semitic speaker at a university, no, they should not be allowed to speak, or she should not be allowed to speak. Israel Apartheid Week, no, it has to go. It's one thing signing up to the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, but universities have to respect it, and they're not. Jewish students should feel free to go to any university in the UK, and at the moment they're not, and that's an absolute disgrace.
Let's have a look at chaos on campus, another report by our friends at CBN.
We've all seen the images. It's against the law when violence occurs.
President Biden breaking days of silence after scenes like these unraveled across campuses over the Israel-Gaza war.
Breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduations. None of this is a peaceful protest.
They won't stop at anything short of divestment. And what divestment means is any company doing business in Israel, especially with the Israeli government. So that includes companies like, Alphabet and Amazon who have deals in Israel. It includes companies like Airbnb, whose, they host homes that are in settlements in the West Bank.
Until these demands are met, we do not have any plans of leaving.
While many demonstrations began peacefully, the tone quickly escalated. At Columbia University, police stormed a university building occupied by protesters, arresting nearly 300. In California, authorities disbanded a UCLA encampment after arresting at least 200 protesters. And in D.C., CBN's Tara Mergener saw a somewhat more peaceful scene at George Washington University.
Behind me, you can hear protesters shouting from the metal barricades they tore down and then placed the Palestinian flag on top. All around are dozens of tents with both students and non-students camping out around the clock.
Images on their shirts and yelling the chants, death to Jews, all of that. I mean, that's clearly anti-Semitism.
Northwestern University grad student Susan Radoff represents at least 300 Jewish students in the Kellogg School of Management.
And so it's really quite shocking to see these kids and a lot of adults too, community members, trying to make this a very black and white issue, act like experts on the issue when they're not, and then virtue signal to others and shame others who are not with them. I've heard of friendships that have been broken over this.
All of this played out as bipartisan lawmakers passed the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act Thursday, securing stronger protection for Jewish students subject to harassment, intimidation, and violence.
There should be no place on any campus, no place in America for anti-Semitism or threats of violence against Jewish students.
USC has canceled its main stage graduation ceremony due to campus protests, while several others are considering similar measures due to safety concerns. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Sadly, we've seen the same sort of protests come to our shores, and the protests currently taking place both at Oxford and Cambridge universities is quite shocking. Now, what do you think of your former university with the protests taking place there now, trying to do a copycat scenario of what's happening in Columbia University and then doing it at Cambridge and Oxford?
Well, apparently the students at Oxford have set up an encampment behind the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. But the thing is, we're in May, we're approaching the middle of May, and these students have got exams, and then there's vacation. So I think they may want to copycat Columbia, but they left it a bit late. What happens when they come back in October, who knows? But, you know, I don't think we're facing the same kind of insurrection, student insurrection in the UK as we faced in the US. That's not to say that it's not incredibly intimidating for Jewish students. And of course, the main Israel Apartheid Week comes in February, March. So possibly the worst is yet to come. We don't know.
Yeah. And Jonathan, how can our Christian viewers watching this program today show solidarity with your community, with the Jewish community at this time of rising Jew hatred, but also at the same time celebrating the incredible achievement of Israel, marking a 76th anniversary as a modern state in fulfilment of biblical prophecy?
Well, I think certainly anybody who has a work colleague who is Jewish or a friend who is Jewish, you know, we're all going through trauma because of what happened on October the 7th. So to express some sympathy and, you know, I know how you're feeling is very much appreciated. But also on the advocacy side, watch the newspapers, watch the BBC. I mean, there was an outrageous letter in it was called the Eastern Daily Press, where a woman referred to Israel as being a special case. Israel's allowed to get away with things which other states couldn't get away with because Israel's a special case, obviously referring to the fact that Jews were killed in the Holocaust. So Israel's allowed to get away. I mean, it's outrageously anti-Semitic. I phoned the editor, I protested to the editor, he agreed to print a reply, but he weakened my reply. He took sections out of the reply, and I've complained to Ofcom. And that's what people need to do. Write to the newspapers, write to the BBC, complain, join the demonstrations, be active.
Great advice. Jonathan, absolute pleasure to have you on the Middle East Report today. Thank you so much, and our hearts are with you and the Jewish community during this horrific time. And I just want to thank you for watching this program today. Sadly, we know that there is a war going on campus regarding Israel, and Jewish people should feel safe at university. But we also want to show this excellent video that shows Israel's remarkable achievements over the past 76 years.
Israel has a story unlike any other. From the time the Israelites first settled in the land and throughout centuries of exile and war, Israel was to eventually re-emerge as a nation. Jewish exiles began their return to Israel in the late 1800s, and over 3 million Jewish immigrants have come from more than 120 nations since Israel was re-established. The Hebrew prophets spoke of this day when the Jewish exiles would be restored to the land of Israel. For I will take you from among the nations, gather you out of all countries, and bring you into your own land. Before officially being declared a state, Israel already had its own national orchestra, the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra, its own university, the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, its own research center, the Weizmann Institute of Science, and its own hospitals, such as Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. Israel's founding leader, David Ben-Gurion, said that this land was the birthplace of the Jewish people. The prophet Isaiah spoke long ago about the revival of the Jewish nation in their ancestral homeland in our day. Shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion was in labor, she gave birth to her children. Israel was officially reborn as a nation on May 14, 1948. But the nation's rebirth also came amid birth pangs. Modern Israel was established just 3 years after the end of the Holocaust, when over 6 million Jews were murdered by the Nazis. Then, as Israel declared its independence, the nation had to fight off 5 invading Arab armies. Remarkably, Israel repelled these attacks, and in 1967, Israeli troops recaptured the beloved city of Jerusalem from Jordanian hands. The Psalms speak of Israel's rebirth as a great dream that would finally be realized, and it would fill the Jewish people with great joy. When the Lord brought back the captivity of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with singing. Over the decades since, Israel has built upon that dream by overcoming many obstacles and by entering into peace accords with neighboring Arab countries. Both before its statehood and afterwards, Israelis began to cultivate the desert, and through their efforts, over 300 million trees have been planted since 1901. Israel is now a vibrant democracy in the Middle East, promoting free speech among its citizens and excelling in such fields as agriculture, high-tech, research and development, and cybersecurity. The story of Israel's journey has been full of challenges and hardships, but it is also a story of resilience and innovation, of a dream realized and biblical prophecies fulfilled. The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem salutes the people of Israel as they celebrate 75 years of independence.